Welcome in to the Formula Un by Americans podcast. I'm your host, Patrick Finley, along with Mr. Stephen Harris. Stephen, what's up, man?
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good.
I'm excited for the new year, 2022.
Yeah, I think we all are. Kind of get
Right.
some things behind us from 2020 and 2021, just everything that's going on. But I don't know if this year's going to be any better with how it's really started.
Yeah.
But maybe we can be optimistic, right?
Yes, let's take that route.
Let's take the optimistic route.
Yeah.
Glass half full, not empty. Well, man, I don't know if the listeners really know, but you're in Orlando. I'm in
Yes.
Birmingham. Our good friend Rob Brazington of the show, he's also in Orlando as well. And a few weeks ago, I was traveling for work and happened to be in Orlando at the same time, and we all were able to get together.
Mhm.
And Stephen, you want to drop in a little bit about what we did when we were in Orlando?
Yes, yeah, we went to Andretti, which they have the karting track there, and we're able to spend pretty decent amount of time there just racing against each other as well as racing against some other people as well. But had a fantastic time there. Big shout out to Andretti and the complex that they have here in Orlando.
For sure, you're 100% right on that, Stephen. That is a phenomenal facility there in
Hmm.
Orlando. Not only from a racing standpoint,
Hmm.
they've got some kiddie tracks that you can jump onto for the small kids, but they've got some big kid
Yes.
tracks as well.
Hmm.
But they also have a lot of simulators, games. So that was a real cool. It's a real cool venue. But one of the best things was so we had bought the package for 3 races, and our first race went well. I think we all got a couple of good hot laps in, and and you got to
Hmm.
also know that there's a lot of people out there. They don't take anything seriously. They just want to do bumper cars for the whole time. And it's very
Yeah.
hard to get a good lap in if you're wanting to do that. Well, on the second race, we managed to seriously. I went back and looked at the times as we all did at dinner that night, but we
Hmm.
got one lap in out of like 8 or 9 laps.
Hmm.
And what did our good friend of the show, Rob Brazington, what did he do as he got off, Stephen?
He let the guys know.
He
And
did.
yes, and they responded really well because they ended up saying, "Hey, just hang off to the side here for a minute. We may have a free time coming up here for the next one." And sure enough, they opened up the track and didn't have anybody in that time slot, so they just let the three of us out there to just put in as many hot laps as we could. And man, talk about it was almost like a bucket list type of thing to just be on a open track, just the three of us. We just kind of spaced out and just tried to pump in the best lap times we could. It was pretty phenomenal.
It really was. And I thought that was a really cool thing that they did by
Hmm.
not only did they say, "Hey, we're going to give you an extra race," they let us three have the racetrack to ourselves, which was
Hmm.
pretty phenomenal.
Hmm.
And I'm sitting here looking at the results right now, and Rob Brazington, a good friend of the show, he had when we left there at close to 5:30, he had the fastest time of the day at a 41.5.
Yeah, man.
Patrick Finley had fourth time of the day at a 42.5. Mr. Harris a 42.8. So all relatively close together for us being the first time that we've ever seen that track. That's pretty good.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was a lot of fun for sure.
Yeah, yeah, indeed. So, but let's actually talk about why we're here. We're here to talk about the new F1 season, and we got underway this past weekend in Bahrain. But before we get to the race in Bahrain, let's talk about some of the off-season moves because that's really going to play. I think, especially after watching Week 1, that's going to play big as we go into the season. And one of the moves is obviously the most highlighted moves was George going to Mercedes and Bottas going to Alpha.
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about just before we get into it? Just what did you think about their race, those two guys, and qualifying?
Yeah, I thought Bottas really showed some skill with that to get that car. I believe it was what P6, I believe it's what he ended up qualifying. So I thought that was really impressive. George definitely seemed to struggle to qualify P9, but first time in that car. Well, I guess first time as a full time racer in that
Yeah.
car. So um, I mean, I think there you can expect some struggles early on before he maybe necessarily finds his form, and also brand new cars too as well. So a lot of adjustments to be made, but he's a younger driver; he'll get it figured out, I think. But I think Bottas showing his experience and ability to learn a new car quicker. Probably the experience of his career has kind of paid off for that. I think so.
Yeah, I think
Well,
he's going to play a really big role at Alpha this year, going
definitely.
into and especially with Joe Guan Yu as his
Mhm,
teammate. So I think he'll be able to teach him a lot
mhm,
in that car as they as everyone adapts to this car because it's a new car for everybody this year. So that's pretty cool to see the new era as it's ushered in
mhm,
and how the guys adapt.
mhm, for sure.
Well, the other move that I think is going to be interesting through the rest of the year, and I I will honestly say when it happened, I was like, oh come on. I mean, why are we going back down this path again?
Mhm,
But in light of all the things that are going on worldwide with Russia and Ukraine and the sponsorship money for Mazepin coming directly from his daddy, I think it
mhm,
was the right move by Haas to cut ties with Mazepin because they did need to cut ties with the Russian money.
mhm.
Um,
Yes, yeah,
I think if his dad's not a sponsor of the team, I think that's maybe a different situation, possibly.
mhm,
But Haas brings Kevin Magnussen back. What were
mhm.
your initial thoughts when you heard that news, Stephen?
Yeah, I mean, the same as yours was just kind of shock and disbelief that they would go backwards, I guess, with that, especially when they had Fittipaldi that was looking to step up into the full-time driver role as opposed to being reserved. And then yeah, so I was pretty surprised. I really honestly thought it was a bad move, but after Bahrain, I think I have to change that view and give them some credit. They put together a good car, and maybe this is a Magnussen that we're starting to see. Maybe he's been able to refine his form a bit and get this figured out for him. So I don't know. I went from kind of hating it to being like, well, good for them. I hope it continues to work out. And obviously, as the only American team, I still, kind of pull for them a little bit here and there just because of that. So it's good to kind of see some progress and some steps forward for him. So,
No, I totally agree with you. I wonder how bad that car was with Grosjean and Hat
good,
and Magnussen at Haas
good point.
because just I mean Magnussen put it P7.
Hmm.
He's not been in an F1 car in over a year. He's not really been in any, he did an IndyCar test,
Hmm.
but he's not
Yeah.
really been racing open wheel the past year. And so for him to come back, not only to have a short testing period, but
Hmm.
also to put the car where he did a 31.8, and Charles was a 30.5,
Hmm.
and put
Wow.
it P7. I mean, and also qualify ahead of George.
Yes. Yeah.
He qualifies ahead of George in the Mercedes. So I think there's
Hmm.
a lot to be said, maybe about where that car was, and just how bad it was.
Yeah, I would agree. That's a great point.
So maybe we do see the resurgence. I mean, and I do want to say resurgence because Haas came in the first year, and they did really, really well their
Yeah.
first year, and
Hmm.
I think it gave a lot of hope to the Americans that they would be able to have a Formula One team they could be proud of. And so maybe
Hmm.
we're starting. Maybe this is the start of something that we can get on board with, and I hope Mick is able to score some points as well this year. That would
Yeah.
be fantastic. So
Yeah. Yeah. I think they definitely have the car for it at this point. So, and it's cool to see the progression of Mick as well, getting P11. That's a career high, and he really had a phenomenal race for getting spun out in lap one to
yeah,
finish how he did and everything. So, definitely, definitely a bright future. I think that's given any Haas fan a lot of hope for a future this year. So, which is cool to see. So,
yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, speaking of testing and Magnussen having that short testing time, coming out of testing, did you have any initial thoughts on the upcoming year and maybe how it plays out and who are the contenders for the year?
I mean, no, not really. I don't really take much of what happens in testing, but I really expected Mercedes to be much better than they were. I thought this was just like every other year where they talk about how terrible of a car they have in testing, and then they come out and lock out the front row. So that was probably the biggest surprise to me, was that they actually weren't able to kind of take the sandbags out and turn up the engine a little bit. So that was pretty fascinating to see. So that was probably my biggest surprise from testing to reality of racing. So I don't know, what was your biggest surprise?
Yeah, for me, I think just looking back at testing, I'm kind of like you. I don't put a lot of stock into it, right?
Hmm.
You have so many different things that that teams are trying to achieve during testing. You don't know the fuel loads that the teams are on. All
Hmm.
teams are doing different simulations on tires and fuel loads and wing configurations and all this. So you really don't know what they're trying to accomplish. And also, I don't think teams are wanting to show their hand, but it
Hmm.
seemed like coming out of testing that Ferrari did have a contender this year. It seemed like
Hmm.
Red Bull had a contender this year, and it also seemed like McLaren was going to be a contender this year.
Hmm.
Maybe not for the championship, but definitely wins. It seemed like they had pace in testing, just overall. It did seem like Mercedes struggled, but and then it seemed like Haas was okay. But I mean, the rest of the teams, to me, I didn't see anything that like jumped out and said like, oh, Alpha is going to be on
Right.
top.
Hmm. Hmm.
I,
Yeah.
and looking at Alpha, uh, I just don't know. So I think you had your couple up top, and then you was like, all right, the rest of everybody else is going to fight to the death, for the
Hmm.
remaining spots in the top six or so. But
Hmm.
that was my initial thoughts coming out of testing. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just always so hard to tell, I feel like. So I don't know. I just don't really put a lot of stock into it at all. But yeah, I mean, like I said, I was pretty surprised with Mercedes more than anything. So
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Well, let's talk for a minute about the race because that's what we're here to talk about. And coming out of testing, they went immediately into the race there at Bahrain, and I think to me, it started off well. It seemed like there was some fighting and some good passing going on, and then it seemed like it got to a little bit of a lull of a race, and things kind of settled in, and you had your nice twos. You had, Charles and Max, and then Carlos, and then Perez, and then Lewis and George, and then surprisingly, Magnussen.
yeah.
Where'd that come from?
No.
But I felt like you had your nice little, everybody right where they, kind of where everybody kind of thought they would be, out of qualifying. But what were your initial thoughts of the race, and then obviously we'll kind of talk about the ending here in a minute.
Okay, right. Yeah, no, I thought the same thing. I thought early on, I felt like there was a certain aggressiveness that I think a lot of drivers had. So there were just, good overtakes and just some good driving early on. Then I don't know if it's just tires fell off and then we started doing pits and people just kind of started settling into their spots. So I kind of felt the same way. It kind of seemed like the second half of the race up until, probably the last 10 laps or whatever, whenever that drama started, just kind of got a little bit on the boring side. But still, even during that time, I can't remember when it was, but when Max and Leclerc were going back and forth
Mm-hmm.
for about 2 or 3 laps, it was just it's really cool to see, and just I full disclosure, I'm a bit of a Ferrari fan, so watching Leclerc drive and when he has a good car, his ability to drive like defensively, I guess, and know when to almost give up the spot to Max on turn one because he knows he's going to
You can get it back,
um,
yeah.
get the DRS, by turn four, and just kind of how he played that out and everything. I thought was just very clever, and just I'm really impressed with how he drives when he has a good car underneath him. He just has a very cerebral approach to everything and really seems to know how to make the car wide when he needs to make the car wide. And I don't know. I just thought it was a really impressive drive from Leclerc.
Yeah, I agree. I think Charles came with his A game,
Hmm.
and he really did have a great race, and drove it, and like you were saying, Stephen, that fight between him and Max, I think
Hmm.
that's what everybody was wanting to see.
100%.
Everybody's
Yeah.
wanting to see cars go back and forth, fighting for the lead, not down in 17th position, and you saw that, and I think
Hmm.
that gave a hope going forward in the year. And I am also wondering too if the sprint races are going to be a little bit more exciting this year as well because of the close knit racing that we saw. Any thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. Haven't actually thought about that, but yeah, that's a great point. I think you'll definitely see. Um, I feel like these cars are going to reward a little bit more aggressive driving in a sense. So I think that, if you have the right car underneath you, I think that, you could see some people making up 5 spots or so in the sprint races, and not being too uncommon. So, and that really didn't happen with the exception of Lewis in Brazil last year. But the sprint races, really, it was kind of how they started, was kind of relatively how they finished. Maybe a couple spots here, a couple spots there. But yeah, I think the close racing, and I think you'll start seeing more overtaking in that for sure.
Yeah, no, I I totally agree. Totally agree. Um, I did see a article, and one thing that we will have a Twitter account going forward for all of our listeners to follow. That we'll be posting some content there, and I will post this. I'll post this on the Twitter. But I did see where Alonso said that overtaking was not as easy. It was not improved. Or following. I'm sorry, following was not as easy as it seemed or uh, improved. So it'll be interesting going forward. I think this next race is in Saudi Arabia, which we know that racetrack is a fast racetrack. So we will definitely get a test of these new cars' crash ability there. And well, I mean, we saw some big wrecks there.
True.
I mean,
That's
I
true.
think
That's true.
Mick had a
Yes.
big wreck. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
there's nowhere to go.
Yeah. No, for sure.
It's like Monaco,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
Just way
faster.
faster.
Yeah, yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of
Yeah. I think.
instead of like 100 miles an hour, you're going, 150 average.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
think about that.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
but yeah, that'll be interesting for sure in
Mhm.
the next week. But Stephen, you had a question that you sent over to me, and I thought about this and looking back on the race, who was the biggest loser? And you put up, is it Carlos? I mean, is it Lewis Hamilton and George Russell with Mercedes, or was it Daniel Ricciardo and Lando Norris? No, I'm sorry, Red Bull.
Or
You said
and
Red Bull.
Red Bull,
No,
Red
you said
Bull,
Red
and
Bull. Yeah,
McLaren.
Red Bull McLaren.
Yes.
I tended the biggest loser in my opinion was McLaren, and the reason I think they are the biggest loser is because it seemed like, I don't know if you saw this. I think I sent it out in the text thread, but Max walking up to Charles after the race
Mm-hmm.
and congratulating him, and they were talking about the passes, and then Charles said, "Man, what happened?" And
Mm-hmm.
Max said, I don't know, something about the fuel pump. So it
Mm-hmm.
seemed like they knew what happened. And there were some conversations going into the race that the fuel pumps may be an issue due to pickup. And I wonder how much of that is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
So I think the fix for Red Bull is going to be easier than the fix for McLaren. So that's why I've said McLaren is the biggest loser. What about you?
Yeah, and I don't disagree with that. I think that that's true. I would argue that it's Red Bull that was the biggest loser too. Up until, what was it, about 5 laps left, you have a second and a fourth place really
Mm-hmm.
pretty much secured. And to miss out on both of those with double DNFs, as we saw the race unfold on Sunday, I think that's more critical to them than what it is McLaren, because they ultimately have the pace to compete for a championship right now. It looks like it's them and Ferrari who are the top two cars at this point. It's a long season, things can change, but like we saw in last season, losing out in a weekend can be, I could make an argument that Lewis Hamilton could have won the championship last year if a couple of mistakes that had happened throughout the year weren't made. He would have won that. I could also make the argument that Red Bull could have won the constructors championship if a couple of things had worked out
Right.
just a little bit differently. So I think it's more critical to them because they're in position to win the constructors and the drivers championship, and to come out of a weekend with 0 points. I think that's just we could really look back at that and say, maybe Ferrari wins it, let's say the constructors, and Leclerc gets the drivers championship, but it's by only a handful of points, we're all going to look back at Bahrain and think, man, remember that double DNF? So to me, I think it has championship implications at this point in time. Obviously, it's a long season. A lot can happen, and maybe it's not even an issue at the end of the season, one way or the other. But I think in the short term, I feel like it's the most critical one. Um, and I feel like McLaren definitely has a lot of issues, but it's not as if we're looking at a championship contender at this point in time just because of how far off the pace they are. We may be looking at, maybe somebody who's trying to get sixth or seventh in the constructors at this point, and maybe better. Maybe they do get it figured out, or maybe Bahrain was just a bad track for him. It's hard to say at this point, but
that's million. Yeah, the constructor. Where
yeah.
you finish in the constructors championship, that's millions of dollars. So I
Mm-hmm.
overall, and I do agree with you. It is a big blow to Red Bull, and I personally think it's more of a blow to the constructors championship than it is the drivers championship,
Mm-hmm. True.
because I think all of these teams this year are going to have issues somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
some way, because of this new car. You're going to get to
Mm-hmm.
a racetrack and you've got, different cooling on there. You've got different ducts on there so all of this is, I mean, what happens? I mean, Mercedes has cut down at, basically with a zero side pod. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
how much of that is going to play into cooling at some point this year?
Good point.
Especially once you get into the hotter races. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think I just think there's going to be a learning curve with this car and the components, and I don't think we're through with seeing issues pop up during races that we may not have seen in previous years.
Mm-hmm. True.
And I don't have any insight on that. I'm just saying,
Right.
I think it's a possibility just with the new car. I mean, you see it. I think NASCAR's dealing with it with their new car this year. To talk about NASCAR for a second, I think they're seeing that, but I think that F1 guys are gonna struggle too. At some point, it may not be a lot of struggles, but at some point they're gonna run into things. But these guys do turn things around rather quickly to get things fixed, and so that's the cool thing about what we're seeing.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. Yeah. It's a
Well,
long season, no doubt about it. That's for sure.
yeah, it is a long season, and we just started, and then we've got another race in 2 days, or yeah, I guess Friday starts practice in Saudi Arabia, and it's hard to think race number two already on deck, but that will be it'll be good to see another track. Good to see some. I think they've made some revisions to that track.
Yes.
I think it's faster now. I
Yeah. Over.
Yeah, I seriously think that I saw something where it said the revisions they made to the track and now it's faster.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah,
I
so I'm
wouldn't have
sure.
expected that, but that's good.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe it's going to top 150 average, but
Yeah.
who knows?
Right.
We'll see. Yeah, yeah. Well, Stephen, what did you have anything else, man? I know that's kind of our last point that we had on our agenda. Did you have anything that we may have overlooked and didn't think about, and then it popped up as we were talking?
No, no, that's nothing. Nothing like that happened. So yeah, I think we're good.
Yeah. Well, cool. Well, like I said, we will have a Twitter. I'm in the final stages of setting that up, but it will be Formula One by Americans. That will be um, our our handle,
And
and we'll make sure it is on all the all the content, and I'm going to add it to the show, so you can just see it right there directly as you're watching our show on the YouTube. So check us out over there. We'll be posting some content, interesting stories. Would love to interact over there. And I think it'll be a great addition as we go forward this year. And we'll maybe add some other channels as who knows, we may throw Steven on TikTok.
Hey, you never know.
You never know. You never know what to expect. So, well, we appreciate you joining us for the first episode of the second season of Formula Un by Americans podcast. And we look forward to this weekend's race and check back soon for another round 2 of the podcast as we get going with this 2022 Formula One season. And as we always end, keep the wheels pointed in the right direction. See you guys next week.